Well, tonight I'm going to do something a little different. Instead of doing an apologetics topic, since Pastor Dale's doing this thing on Wednesday nights about testimonies, I thought that would be a good topic for tonight, just go over the testimony, my testimony, because at first when he brought that up, I thought, well, no one really is going to want to hear mine, or people probably already have, so why bother? But something he said that kind of stood in my mind, which started to change my mind on this, is he said, share your testimony not because you want to talk about yourself, but because you want to tell others what God has done in your life. And then he said, I promise you that when you share your testimony, someone will be encouraged. And then two people shared their testimony on Wednesday, and even though I don't have necessarily anything in common with their stories, I definitely was encouraged hearing what they had to say, and so it was cool. It was kind of like confirmation to me, like maybe this is what we should do tonight. So I decided I'll lay aside my fears, all the reasons I could talk myself out of sharing, and that's what I'm going to do tonight, share the testimony. So when I considered where to begin, it was really difficult because I kind of have to tell you who I was before Christ, since today everything is different, everything has changed. And it's not like I don't still have all of this garbage inside of me that I deal with every day, but the level of sin that I was just willingly living in and just kind of saturated with is just totally different from the person I am today. So when I say, he saved me from this and this, if you didn't know me back then, it might not have the same impact. So, growing up as a kid, I kind of had this belief that women or a woman was going to make me happy and feel fulfilled in this life. That was like the ultimate goal in life, was to get married, and if I was to get married and find someone to love me, then I would feel totally fulfilled and happy. I had no exposure to church or Christ as a kid, other than my grandma had some pictures of Jesus on the wall. She was Mormon, and she also had the Last Supper picture on her wall. But other than those pictures, the only exposure I ever had to church were two experiences that I can remember. One was a church lock-in that I went to, and the whole time I was just trying to make out with a girl. And then the other one, I went to a flag football game with the youth group and ended up almost getting in a fist fight. Well, I did get in a fist fight with the youth pastor. So that was it. That was the only experiences I've had with church. Even up until I became a Christian in my 20s, I hadn't even heard of Noah's Ark, no stories, no Bible stories. Literally nothing. I knew the name Jesus Christ, and I saw that picture on the wall and associated him with that, but I had no idea that he was God. Nothing. I didn't know anything. So basically, I had no hope in my life without knowing Christ, or I at least placed my hope in this idea of marriage and really relied on women to make me happy and feel whole. Well, I went into the military straight out of high school, and eventually I got together with a girl that I knew from school while I was home on leave in Oregon, and we got married really, really quickly, as in I had been back 2 days, and then we got married because I thought I may have gotten her pregnant, and when I had to go back to North Carolina, there would be no chance for us to be together if she was pregnant if we didn't get married, because they pay you more in the military when you get married. It was on a very, very small salary anyway. So, but even if that didn't happen, I kind of alluded to, I had this unhealthy reliance on women, so I was kind of looking at it like, this is my chance for a happily ever after. Well, it turns out she was not pregnant, and she couldn't have kids, but we stayed together for about a year until I was getting ready to deploy to Afghanistan, and then she moved back here to Oregon to be with family while I was gone. I got to Afghanistan on my 21st birthday, and everything was going pretty well the first few months in our marriage because you don't have any contact, or at least I didn't have any contact with the outside world, and that sounds like it would be a bad thing and actually hurt the relationship, but honestly, I think that when troops have too much contact with home, that it actually really hurts their morale. So not having any contact kind of helped. It was like you miss them immensely, but you don't really know what you're missing out on and everything like that. So the place I was at, we had to build the base up from nothing. It wasn't actually even big enough to be called a base. It was called something else, but we built it up, and then eventually internet came and telephones came, and so started having a lot more contact with back home, and that's when things really started to get really bad with me and my ex. We were fighting all the time over finances, and she started going to bars and clubs, which I was not okay with, and she had never done this before, so it was totally a shift in everything. She also started hanging out with all these guys, and all of her friends were guys. And because, as she put it, she had no women friends because girls were too gossipy and catty. So this was like the justification for having all these guy friends. And I tried really hard to be, supportive and not overbearing or controlling, because in my experience, when I had tried to do that, like stand firm on little things that bothered me, it just ended up pushing people away. But at the same time, I was struggling with this, all this stress from what was going on in Afghanistan, and also mixed with worrying about what was going on at home. Eventually, I started seeing a therapist, a Navy therapist, a corpsman. He prescribed me this antidepressant, and I started to have these suicidal thoughts, but I was just keeping them to myself, because in the military, especially in the Marines, you have to be this tough guy, and you don't want to show any emotions or anything like that. Plus, I didn't really have anyone to talk to. Everything was going south with my marriage, and you just don't really talk about these things in the military with your buddies. About 8 months into the deployment, Obama started this thing called the Force Optimization Plan, and all that means is basically troops were going to start coming home early. And I was a part of this really small detachment. It was only 13 people, and I was the only one who hadn't taken their R&R yet, which is they give you 2 free weeks, 2 weeks from the day you get to your destination, whether it's Oregon, North Carolina, wherever you go, and then the last day is the day you step back on the airplane. So it's not like all that travel takes up to 2 weeks' time. You get 2 weeks of paid time off to go home and spend with family and things like that. Well, I had saved it for the very last portion because everyone else took it as soon as they possibly could. And my thought was, I didn't want it to be like the halfway point and then get back over there and be like, oh, I'm only halfway there. It would just be really demoralizing for me. So I wanted it to be like, okay, I'm home and I get to come back in just a few more months and see everyone. And so that was kind of my thought. I wanted to wait as long as possible before taking it. Now they randomly chose me to go home because since I was the only one that hadn't taken the R&R. So anyway, I was supposed to be at 13 months. They were going to send me home early, and that sounds like a good thing initially, but this was devastating to me. The news was really, really bad because I was counting on another 6 months of twice as much pay, and that was tens of thousands of dollars, which especially back then was like life or death for me or for us. So I was really counting on that money, and believe it or not, the stress level was less in Afghanistan than back in my unit. Marriage stuff aside, just the day in and day out stuff that you go through. So got this stuff going on with the wife back home. She's actually stealing money, basically. I couldn't control my bank account. She was taking it all out of the ATM, so I couldn't see where she was spending it. After I realized that she was spending it at bars and clubs and confronted her, And so I have no idea what's going on. I just know that she's hanging out with guys, taking all the money out in cash, and my bank account was at zero every month. And now I'm being told I'm going home, and had all these plans, financial plans, so that was really stressful. I was going to have to go back to North Carolina without her. So I was getting pretty depressed at this point, and like I had said, I'd already been kind of considering suicide, and I don't know if this was because of the depression meds or what, but I was just feeling really, really disrespected and betrayed. You know, the one person that I thought was going to make me the most happy was now the source of all this pain. She was also going out getting tattoos and piercings without even asking me about it, and you know, some of them were really strange. Anyway, and she would ask me, "Hey, do you like this piercing?" I'd say, "I really don't," and then she would do it just to spite me. She was kind of trying to get back at me. So the Marines, they send me back to this place called Camp Leatherneck, which is where you go when you're waiting to go home, basically. And I'm just waiting for my flight home. You never know when you're going back. They just tell you, "Hey, get ready, tomorrow you're going home." But everything was sort of coming to a head at this point. It all seemed to kind of be compiling on me at once. And like the last place in the world that I wanted to go was back to this place in North Carolina. It was just a terrible place. You know, Afghanistan was bad, but at least you're getting paid twice as much, and at least it feels like you're doing the job that they trained you to do. And so it was like how things were supposed to be. So at this time, while I'm waiting for the flight, my dad and my aunt come down from Salem to go to my wife's, the house that I was renting with my wife, go to her house and plan a coming home party for me. And when they didn't tell her they were coming. My dad's just kind of like that. It just doesn't, you never know when he's coming. And then as he's walking up to the door, he sees through the window that she's laying on her friend that's a boy's lap who's in his boxers, and she's just in a towel. And so he ended up telling me about this, and he wrestled with telling me because I was in Afghanistan, didn't want to stress me out anymore. But he did tell me, and then after I confronted her, she eventually came clean to me, but she would only do it over the phone because she didn't want me to show everyone the messages on Facebook or whatever. There's a lot of other things that are going on at this time, too much to really get into. It's just a bunch of nuanced details. It doesn't really matter, but the combination of all the stress and then the depression meds and all these things that were happening, you know, I had this unhealthy expectation on my ex-wife to make me feel loved and fulfilled, and I didn't have God in my life, so there was really no hope greater than this relationship that I had idolized so much. So I told my ex-wife that I intended to shoot myself on a Facebook message, and then I went to the bathroom. There are these shared bathrooms, and loaded my rifle. And you go everywhere with your rifle in Afghanistan. You have it on you at all times. You sleep with it. But you don't keep them loaded unless you're going to go off base or you're going to be on gate duty or something like that. So the whole time I was preparing to do this, I was deep down, I think, trying to get caught so someone would stop me. So when I go in the bathroom and I load just one round in and I cocked it really loud, and I'm pretty sure there was somebody else in that bathroom with me, but he didn't say anything. I don't know why I thought he would, because hindsight, if I was that guy, I probably would have been really quiet and pulled my legs up too, because who knows why they're loading that gun. It's probably pretty scary for him, actually. But I walk out of the bathroom, and there's these, I'm thinking, I need to go find this big open space because I don't know if the bullet's going to go through me, and I don't want to hit anyone behind me. But as soon as I come out of the bathroom, there are these two other Marines there, and they're waiting for me. And they said that I needed to go with them because our boss wanted to talk to me. And I was asking them what for, but they didn't know. They were just kind of the messengers. But it seemed really urgent, and their demeanor was acting kind of like they had to take me back to him. So my first thought was, my wife told them. She told them that, I don't know how she got a hold of them, but she got a hold of them and she told them what I was planning on doing. So I kind of panicked, and later I found out all they were trying to do was bring me back to him so he could tell me when my flight was, and then he was going to tell me what to do in preparation for the flight. But my mind's kind of irrational in this moment. My heart's pounding, scared. I think they know. I felt like I was kind of backed into a corner. So after pausing for a little while and just trying to kind of consider all my options at this point, I started getting scared, like, what if I get caught? What if they find out there's a bullet in the rifle? All this stuff. So eventually, like I said, I panicked. I ran away from them, and I get about a half mile away into this big open area. Pretty sure they were preparing it for some barracks buildings or something. It was all flat. And those two guys and my roommate followed me out there. But the two guys stayed behind, and my roommate approached me. Now, they probably thought I was going to turn the rifle on them, and they were scared. They were hiding behind the corner. Only my roommate was, brave enough to approach me. And for some reason, that just made me really, really sad. Like, they thought that I was going to hurt them, and that just kind of made all these emotions flood in. And so my roommate, who's shaking and obviously scared, he just keeps coming closer and talking to me and trying to ask me what's the matter. He really did his best to try to talk me down. I don't remember really anything he said because I just had this tunnel vision. I had already made up my mind. I had already been thinking about this for months, kind of planned exactly how I was going to do it, would consider different ways. For whatever reason, I knew I didn't want to shoot myself in the head. I was scared that if I survived, that I would be a vegetable or something like that. And my thoughts were, I feel all this pain in my heart, and so that just seemed like a really good place to put the bullet. I asked my roommate to tell my family that I loved them when I was gone, and he said something trying to talk me down, but I don't remember what he said. And I remember the last thing I said to him was, "It's too late," before I aimed the gun at my heart. And as soon as I said that and started to aim it at myself, he lunged at me, and he swatted the butt of the rifle as I fired, and it caused the bullet to land just 3 inches to the side in my chest. So I remember I hit the ground, and I was paralyzed. Not totally paralyzed, I think I was in shock. And I started to fade out of consciousness after a few minutes. All I could do was, just gaze off to my right, and I was just looking out into the desert, basically. And I know my arms were off to my side, and I remember thinking, because I felt the hot ground on the back of my left hand, but I didn't register in my brain that it was from the sun making the ground hot. My thoughts were, I couldn't see it, but that's my blood pool. And if my blood pool is out there already, that far away from my body, then I'm definitely going to die soon. That's it. This is it. Well, I'm not even totally aware of my surroundings because I was in shock, but unbeknownst to me, my roommate had gotten on top of me, and he was putting pressure on my wound. And eventually, a man whose face I never saw came and shoved his thumb in the hole, and that's the only thing that kept me from bleeding out and dying. The only reason I remember it is when he shoved his thumb in there, it kind of jolted me out of the shock briefly, and his fingers were just like the thick, calloused fingers, and it just hurt so bad. But those two guys, they kept me alive long enough for the British medics to load me up and take me to the hospital. There was a British hospital that we shared. It's not like in the U.S. where the ambulance responds within 5-10 minutes of something happening. So my thoughts were pretty much any wound can be fatal. I had no kind of sense of time at this point, and just fading in and out of consciousness. Honestly, I really don't know how I survived it all. With as long as it takes them to respond to things, It just had to be those two guys. When I woke up 3 days later, I was in a German hospital, and they said I had gone through like 4 or 5 surgeries. I really didn't believe anything was real. I don't know if it was all the meds or just the last thing I remembered. I was dying in my mind, so I just thought it was all kind of a dream. And even months after, when I was out of the hospital, I would still kind of walk around wondering, is any of this really real? So I remember when I left for Afghanistan from Oregon, and I was getting on the plane to leave, all my family was there saying goodbye, and I have no idea why, but I had this feeling like I was never coming home, like I was never going to see them again. Like it wasn't just like any of the other times I'd went home. I was just like crying nonstop, couldn't stop crying. I just had this looming feeling I was going to die. And it wasn't like a fear or a plan at that point. It was just this feeling that I had. So I remember the first time I ever felt a cool breeze again. I don't have any idea where we were, but I was on this bus, and they had kind of torn all the seats out and converted it to carry 4 or 5 gurneys. And I was next to the window, and I remember seeing I just woke up briefly, saw the trees, and felt the cool breeze, and I was like, I totally died. I'm definitely dead right now. Must have gone to heaven or something. The next several months after all this were really difficult because although I survived, I was really disappointed when I realized that I failed. Also, when I was being operated on, a doctor later told me that I briefly died on the table, and I can actually vividly remember what happened. And it was anything but enjoyable or good, and so it wasn't like a heaven experience or anything like that. But I also wouldn't describe it as hell. It wasn't either of those, but it was definitely really bad. I could give all these details. It was just really, really bad, and I remember it even to this day. And I didn't have that white light experience that you hear other people talk about, and so I thought this was like undeniable proof that God didn't exist. And I kind of used this to fuel my rebellion against him for the next couple of years at least. I was also really worried that since I survived, people were going to think that I just shot myself to get out of the deployment or something, rather than genuinely trying to kill myself. That was more important to me than being alive. And I would say one of the only reasons that I didn't try to finish the job is because the military sent my dad to this hospital in Virginia where I was, and my dad never cries, but he was standing next to my hospital bed with tears streaming down his face when I woke up, and he said to me, "Son, what were you thinking? If I lost you, they would have 2 bodies they'd have to bury." And that's the first time I really stopped and thought about anyone else with all of this. I was just so focused on how hurt I was, how I felt. Never once did I consider that it was going to hurt my family, other than maybe right before when I told my roommate to tell them I loved them. Like that was somehow heroic. To the last words that he said were that he loved you guys. I also didn't even think about how he would have felt responsible for me doing that, because he had told me about the affair, and that was sort of the last straw for me. So it was really eye-opening when he was standing by the bed, and just I didn't realize how devastating it would have been for him to have lost me. Before I left North Carolina and returned to Oregon after I got out of the military, I met Megan, who was attending college over kind of near where I was stationed, and we became serious really quickly. She was going to go in the Navy, and I talked her into coming to Oregon and enlisting in the Navy from Oregon. In reality, I just wanted to have more time with her before she left, and luckily for me, she got disqualified for her eye. Unlucky for her, I guess. She ended up with me and lost an eye. But when we got here, I guess I just had this expectation that all of my friends and family were going to be waiting for me, like ready to pick up right where we left off and make up for lost time. like I had been. Like I just felt like the whole time in the military, that's all that was working to that end. And but when I got here, in reality, they had all kind of moved on with their lives, and I wasn't really a part of it anymore. And around this time, I started to experience PTSD for the first time, although I didn't know what it was, but I knew that I felt like a different person and like something had changed, although I couldn't have explained it to you. But I would lose my temper at the drop of a hat and would break things like constantly. I actually really liked being angry like this all the time because it felt safe, and anger seems like a useful emotion. You don't shut down, you actually have energy to do something. And I felt really vulnerable because I had this new disability now, because when I shot myself, I hit these nerves and I don't have a left shoulder anymore. So when I was angry, I guess I felt powerful or less vulnerable maybe. And then later I learned that anger is a masking emotion, so instead of feeling guilt and shame and depression, I would just get angry. I had to give you this backstory for you to fully understand just what Christ has done for me and just what he has saved me from. It was really bad, especially certain times I could remember. I remember the anger. It was so bad. One time Megan and I were walking down the street, eating ice cream, holding hands, and some guy, younger homeless guy that was my age, he said to her, "Nice butt," or something like that. And without even thinking about it, I took my ice cream cone and threw it right in his face. And I was just ready to go right then. I mean, cops were called and everything. And the only reason it didn't end up in a fist fight is because he was so drunk he couldn't even really stand. And then all these people got involved, and they actually, he was a regular troublemaker, I guess, and so they all blamed him. But in reality, I should have probably gone to jail for that. He made a comment he shouldn't have, but I chucked an ice cream in this guy's face. And I still think about it all the time, like how crappy I was, like just so volatile. I would just blow up. It got to the point where I knew that these problems, these anger problems, were going to cause Megan to leave at some point. Because no healthy person can put up with the issues that I had. I was very much using PTSD like an excuse. I wasn't ever really trying to get better. But I started to try to seek help, and the VA, they would give me these medications. None of them ever helped me in a positive way or changed anything in a positive way. And I even went to an inpatient PTSD program at one point, but I honestly didn't get any better at all. Through these different veterans programs that I was getting involved with, I met this guy named Andrew, who was a Christian man, and he was also a veteran. He started taking Megan and I to dinner every week, and while we were eating, we knew he was Christian, so we would come prepared and drill him with these questions that we had, questions about God and the Bible. And he didn't always have the answers for us, or try to answer them. Maybe he would just say, "I really don't know. That's a good question." But he never lost his patience with us, and that's something that really stood out to me. Even though we were kind of passive-aggressively mocking his beliefs, the questions we had in themselves were mocking. I was always kind of respectful. I considered him a friend, but I did not respect his beliefs. I thought only stupid people would believe there's a God, and then I would always kind of default back to my near-death experience because I didn't get that white light experience. One night I used that when talking to him as justification for not believing in God. I was like, well, I know that there's no God because this happened to me. And he gave me this possible answer, not even necessarily the answer, just a possible answer, one that I hadn't thought of before. And it really just stuck with me, and it totally, shook the entire foundation that I had for that wall that I had built between me and God. I didn't suddenly begin believing in God after that, but because I still saw that belief in Christ as God was naive or unreasonable, But that wall, like I said, had some cracks in it. And, I had this really, really hard heart towards God, for sure. And I feel like this really just kind of softened it a little. My mind was totally closed, and I wouldn't even entertain the possibility of God existing. And this just kind of put a crack in it so God could get through, I think. And this is one of the reasons I think apologetics is so important, because I've lived through it. I've been that person that I never would have moved forward or given God a chance if, I think, did the battery die? No. I never would have given God a chance if I don't want to say Andrew put that crack in the wall, but, through Andrew, the Holy Spirit put that crack in that wall. I don't think apologetics should ever, can or should ever directly result in someone believing in Christ, but it can open the door and kind of allow the Holy Spirit to reach the person. It's like setting up the meeting. But we didn't walk away that night convinced, and for many more weeks we would get back into our car and brag about how badly we bested him in I don't want to say argument, but in the conversation. We would sit there in the car and laugh and be smug and just like make fun of his ignorance together. But then in the moments after, I'm not sure if Megan would feel this same thing, but after we'd finished laughing and would start to drive away, I would have this feeling in my heart, and I had no idea what it was, but I remember feeling it. Later, I learned that that's conviction, and it's exactly the perfect word to describe what I was feeling. It's like that feeling that you get when you do something that you know is wrong, or that you're not supposed to do. And my heart would kind of beat a little faster. I would just feel this tinge of kind of fear, and I just knew deep down that I was wrong, even though I would just kind of bury it and ignore it. I remember that feeling. Now, although from the outside looking in, our lives probably looked like a huge wreck to everyone else, Megan and I both felt like we were in a really good place, like everything was going well. We weren't struggling financially anymore. We weren't fighting like we used to, and we felt generally happy. But I remember having a conversation in the car one time, we both said that we felt like there was something missing. And Megan asked me, what do you think we should do? And I said, I don't know. I guess good people tend to go to church, so we could try that, but I don't know. I guess we could try. I knew I didn't want to go to Andrew's church because I didn't want to feel like obligated to stay if I didn't like it, or if things didn't work out or whatever. So Megan mentioned that she saw this church logo with a wave on it, and being the beach girl that she is, she wanted to give that one a shot. When we first walked in, I was just totally petrified. I mean, I felt like we were just going to be judged by everyone, and although I'd never been to church, in my vast amount of church knowledge, I had these expectations that church was supposed to be like. First, I thought people had to read the King James Version, and I mean old King James. It had to be these and thous. I have no idea what Bible came first, nothing. I just knew you had to read the King James Version. I also thought you had to sing those somber-sounding songs, which I later learned were called hymns. You just had to be like all somber the whole time. Weird thing is I never felt like you had to wear a suit or anything. I didn't own one, so, I mean, I don't know how I avoided that belief, but maybe because there's some good in that belief, so maybe I just had all the bad ones. But so I walk in, and Seth and the worship team started busting out all this contemporary music, and all these red flags started popping up for me, and I was just looking around at everyone and judging everyone like I was scared everyone was going to do to me, and I was just looking for an opportunity to bolt, like a moment when it wouldn't be awkward for me to stand up and walk out, and no one would like turn around and see us or anything. And also, it was like the amount of songs that they would play. It was like, oh my gosh, how many songs are they going to play? Oh, I remember that being such a irritation to me. And now it's like, do some more. That was great. I don't know. It's weird how God changes things in you. And I remember I used to get really irritated by the amount of songs. So I had decided, okay, I'm going to leave. This is not for me. This was a mistake. I'll just hang around until the pastor says something, and maybe when everyone's praying and closing their eyes, then we'll leave. But we'll just see what the pastor says. But then Pastor Dale started preaching, and I'm telling you, he was not speaking. It was God speaking directly to me through him. He was preaching on exactly what I was thinking about and exactly what I needed to hear at that moment. And it was just so crazy. It was too specifically, it felt specifically designed for me. It was so crazy that I decided, well, we'll keep coming until, and kind of test that. See, well, next week it surely could not be the same situation. But time and time again, it was like every sermon was prepared for me, or at least prepared with me in mind, like he knew what was going on in my life or something. I remember one time I even came up and talked to him, and I asked him, did somebody tell you what's going on in my life? Like almost accusing him. Like, who told you? Why did you make that message for me? I was kind of insulted. And he's like, I would never do that. I would never, no. These are all things where I'm either talking like I'm talking to myself, things that I've been through, or just something that I feel like God has told me to say. I would never, if someone told me something about you, I would never prepare a message like that. But I had that was how paranoid I was. I thought, this pastor who I've never even spoke to knows what's going on in my life because he's preaching directly up to the stuff that's going on in my life. I'm a really, really skeptical person, but little by little, the walls that I had built between me and God were being torn down. And finally, I felt like one day there were just too many coincidences to reasonably just consider it as just chance. So at the very least, I became curious that at least there's a possibility that God is real and that the Bible is true and this stuff isn't just made up, some sort of weird religious thing that people do for tradition. Maybe there's actually something to it. So I had asked the pastor to baptize us before I even really knew what that meant. And I had told Andrew that we had planned on getting baptized. And he asked me, he said, that's wonderful news, but I have to ask, have you actually accepted Christ into your heart yet? And I shrugged and I said, I don't even really know what that means or how to do that. And he said if we wanted to, that he would lead us in the prayer right there in his living room. Now, I don't think at this point Megan was entirely convinced. Maybe she was still doubting too. I was definitely doubting in that moment. And I don't know why, but I was just really scared to say that prayer. Like, I don't know where the fear came from, but I just remember feeling terrified, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to do it. Like, I felt like I needed to run. And I don't know why, but I ended up telling him yes. Maybe just that curiosity, like I said, just giving God a chance, maybe. While he was praying, I remember I was just shaking, like when you get adrenaline and you don't use it, and your body kind of convulses. And my heart was pounding really fast, and I was scared. After he prayed, it's not like I felt any different. I still kind of felt sick from all that unused adrenaline. Didn't really know what that even meant, like what all that meant. But I meant the prayer. I just didn't know what was going to result from it. But I decided, basically, the whole experience was me giving God a chance, not testing him to prove that he was real, but giving him a chance. Like, okay, maybe God really does exist. So it was kind of like a willingness. Just instead of being unwilling, now I was kind of willing. Soon after that, we were baptized together at somebody's house in their hot tub. And it's not like I came out of the water and doves were flying and I felt any different or the heavens opened up. Honestly, I was just kind of weirded out. Like, the whole thing was just weird. I wore a stupid shirt that I shouldn't have worn, and it was sticking to my skin, and everyone was all excited, but I didn't understand why they were excited. I don't know why they were applauding when I came up. You know, it's just the whole thing. I was not really sure why, but the and then I was also really concerned about looking stupid, and so doing this public thing was really difficult for me, at least. So I didn't come out of the water and feel like everything was different or anything changed at all. I didn't have any new feelings. But I actually do have a moment in history when I remember where everything did change for me, where everything became real for me, where I totally became convinced and sold for Christ and believed that he does exist and that he does actually love me. So I remember that there was this guy in the military, and he told me the reason he believed was because he witnessed people run through a storm of bullets and come out the other side unscathed. And so that was his proof. But to me, that was just chance. That's not proof to me. You know, that could be any number of things. The people could be terrible shots. And so my moment that makes sense to me may not make sense to everyone else. It may not be as impactful to you as like God appearing in the flesh and like burning your eyes out or something. I don't know. But it was exactly what I needed. It was not, I don't think if he did appear to me in the flesh, I would have been convinced. I probably would have, talked my way out of believing somehow. But Megan and I, we were in our driveway, and a friend of hers who worked down at Fred Meyer's came up, and she said she really needed to talk to us. And she came up and she said she's working with this guy who turns out to be the guy that my ex-wife had cheated on me with. And he was telling this story about this guy who was me, and he didn't know that this girl knew us. So he was telling them this. He was basically going around spreading all these untrue stories about me and what actually happened in between me and my ex. And the reason for this, because they needed to save face. We all grew up in this area. We all went to school together. We had a lot of the mutual friends. And I was not going around telling everyone, hey, so-and-so cheated on me, but I think they were worried that I was going to, so they tried to take preemptive measures and say, hey, she was married, yeah, but it wasn't her fault, and save face kind of thing. But this girl, at this point, we were still super baby Christians, but God had been changing us. And this girl, she met us after we had started changing, and she said to herself when she was hearing these stories, no, I know these people, and that's not who they are. It's just not true. So she came up and she had to tell us. Now, I had mentioned the whole ice cream thing. That was pretty tame for the stuff that the way I would react to things. The only reason that guy didn't end up in the hospital is because he was drunk. I didn't realize he was homeless at first, so I felt really bad afterwards, but I just threw the ice cream in his face, so now we got to fight. And so the whole thing, it was, but my normal reaction was very violent, very over the top. Most people maybe would have done something, but they wouldn't have done the crap that I would do. And so my normal response to her coming up and telling us this would be to get in the car, go down and put him in the hospital, because that was justice to me. After everything you guys did to me, you ruined my life and all this, and I mean, at that time, my life was ruined, Now I could see that it wasn't, but after everything you guys did to me, and now you're going to go around and spread lies about me? I don't think so, not in my town. But I can tell you, although that's my default emotion, that was my default reaction, and even the reaction that I liked to do, I liked to feel rage and anger, like I had said. Even though that's what I wanted to do, it's not like I wanted to change at that point. I felt peace instead. And I knew, because I was kind of like, when I was hearing her talk, thinking, okay, where's the rage? Here it comes, and it never came, and it was just peace. As a matter of fact, I actually felt a little bad for them, because it had been a while at this point, and they still felt like they needed to defend their actions and what they did. I just kind of felt sorry for them. And I also learned this lesson from, how to deal with if someone's just trying to spread lies about you. If you ever have been accused of something and then you try to defend yourself, it actually kind of just makes yourself look more guilty. But in reality, the thing that caused people to know those things were false is just to live contrary to the lies they were spreading. So instead of, and it's not like we had this mental thought like, oh, I'm just going to live opposite of that. I just saw the result, God changing us, and then people saying, that's not you guys, that's not you. Well, I keep saying you guys, it was all me, not Megan. So the best way you could defend yourself against lies is to just live so that they're not true, if she had accused me of being a guy that flies off the handle all the time, and people see me flying off the handle all the time, of course it's true. But if she accuses me of, cheating on her, then people can look at me and be like, okay, well, obviously we don't see that. She's had all these guys. He's only been with one girl. I don't know. I'm just trying to come up with a bad example, and it's not really working, doing it justice. But essentially just live contrary to, you don't have to worry about lies. You just live the way that God leads us to live. And if someone is actually your friend, they would be able to recognize that it's just a lie. So when I felt that peace in the driveway, this was the most revealing piece of evidence to me that God exists. It was, first off, it felt like he had taken away this emotion that I was used to and liked and hid in, and he replaced it with this one that was 10 times better, and I don't have to go to jail with that emotion. It was just like as impactful to me as if he had appeared in the flesh. My walk with Christ, it's a journey. All of our walks with Christ are a journey, so it's not like there haven't been peaks and valleys in this walk, or moments where I've failed and gone into rage. It's not like every time, instead of feeling angry now, I always feel peace. But that one instance was exactly what I needed in that moment. And from that moment on, I actually started to really believe the stuff that would be in Pastor Dale's sermons or the things I would read in the Bible. I wouldn't approach it with a skeptical mind. I would actually be open-minded to it. But better yet, I started to actually apply the truths of the Bible in my life, and I really wanted to change. And sometimes things changed really fast because, I don't know, if when you're just a new Christian, you're like on fire for the Lord, and it's easier to make those changes. Other things, I'm going to be working with the rest of my life, but the fact is I want to change those things now. I didn't want to then. I think there was also maybe a level of supernatural healing that took place because no amount of medication or anything ever really helped me cope with the PTSD stuff I was having, and I was not really able to function as a normal human being. I just wanted to go out in the woods and hide from the world and build a cabin and never talk to anyone ever again. So I do feel like maybe there's some supernatural healing that took place before I was really trying to help myself. But truly believing in Christ motivated me to make the changes that really needed to happen. I finally realized that instead of trying to fill this God-sized hole with the world, I finally started trying to fill that hole with God. Instead of relying on women to make me happy or fulfilled, at least, I rely on God to make me fulfilled. Megan, she saw me at my worst and has been with me through all of that. And as I've attempted to reflect more and more of Christ, I always fall short, but thankfully she's patient and gracious. Today, there's so many things that God's blessed us with. We have 3 beautiful little girls, a marriage that has a firm foundation that's built on Christ. Sometimes I look back at the past and I'm just overwhelmed with how much that God has blessed me with. God sent that roommate to save me even before I had chosen him, because he knew what was to come. He knew that Ivy needed to be in this world. He knew that Hope and Charlotte were going to need a home and someone to love them and protect them. If it wasn't for God sending that roommate, God protecting me in the times when I was in rebellion, saving my life, that I never would have seen Ivy born, heard her call me daddy, or learned that you can love someone else's kids just as fiercely as you do your own. But most importantly, I never would have never met God or experienced His immense love that he has for me. I'm not special in the sense that he hasn't chosen others. 2 Peter 3:9 says, "The Lord is not slow to fulfill his promise, as some count slowness, but patient towards you, not wishing that any should perish, but that all should reach repentance." The same God who has revealed himself to me wants to reveal himself to you. The same God who saved me and loves me beyond words, feels the same way towards you. He holds out his hand, eager for us to take it, and I promise that if you do, you won't regret it. I've only given you a small snapshot of this lifetime of miracles that God has performed in my life, but hopefully it's enough to have encouraged someone out there. So thank you for listening, and God bless.